Welcome to episode 106 of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. We finally got Orioles stuff to talk about after really the season not starting at all and the Orioles not really doing anything for the longest time. We have the Major League Baseball draft to talk about, and the Orioles have a group of 6 new players coming into the system. It was a shortened draft, as we know, only 5 rounds, but they added 6 new players. We're going to talk about that, mainly just the first round pick, because let's be honest, and we'll get into this more in depth, but if we're being honest, I don't know really anything about these players. Ian doesn't, and most of you listening out there don't. So we will appeal to the experts when we can, but if we're being real, not a lot of people out there, even professional people out there, media outlets, don't really know who these guys are, have ever seen them play, have ever heard their names before. So we're not going to pretend like we have been scouting these guys forever, but we'll get into it a little bit more later. We also have to talk about John Harbaugh, who appeared on 105.7 The Fan earlier this week. And, that wouldn't have been a headline-worthy thing, although it is nice to hear from the head coach of the Ravens when you can, because it's not like we're hearing from him on a weekly basis like we do during the season. So there's plenty you could ask him, especially about the whole coronavirus situation and how the NFL is trying to navigate that. And when he was asked about that, he spoke very candidly about it, and we'll get into his quotes. He didn't really mince his words at all. And to tie into that, I thought it would be good to bring up the NBA briefly. Some news has come out, and reportedly a bunch of players were on a conference call together, and a lot of them have expressed concern with resuming play. A lot of them have also expressed that they would choose to sit out the remainder of the season. So I think that is important to get into. And we'll tie Major League Baseball together with that because, again, I'm so sick of talking about it, but if you can't tell, I'm fed up with this whole baseball situation, and I think I pretty much just lost hope, but I'll save that for the end. Before we get rolling, I did want to bring this up. I wasn't planning on it, but I woke up this morning and saw this on social media, and I had been hearing about it the past couple days at work. As if you are a listener and didn't know, I've had the great opportunity, it's been a lot of fun, to produce Jeremy Kahn's show every day on 105.7 The Fan. And Jeremy is obviously very close with a very special kid here in Baltimore, and that's Mo Gaba. If you don't know who that is, look him up. He's a legendary fan in Baltimore, and he's been fighting cancer his entire life. So many trials and tribulations, and through it all has approached it with nothing but a smile on his face. And guys like Trey Mancini have continuously brought him up, praised him. When Trey was given Most Valuable Oriole Award last year, he gave the trophy to Mo. It's just the kid's so special. And what I heard this week is that things are still not good for Mo. He's still battling, and we'll leave it at that. All I know is that he's in a rough fight right now. Things aren't the news has not turned good. So I'll say that. And Jeremy, I know working from him, is one of the most generous people I know. Whether it's his time, his money, donating whatever he can. I woke up this morning to see some tweets from him that he is collecting donations. I know he mentioned it last night that he's going to go see Mo and his mom on Tuesday. Is going to get the chance to see them, and he's collecting some money that he's going to give to Mo's mom on Tuesday. We will retweet it from the Charm City account, but if you want to know more, you can go to Jeremy Kahn's Twitter account at Jeremy Kahn 1057. He's got a couple donation options, PayPal, Venmo, if you're interested. Check it out if you want. You don't have to give a lot. Give a buck or two if you can. I know times are tough for everyone right now, but this kid, like I said, is just really, really special. Anything will help his mom through this because it's It hasn't been easy on him, we know, but it's been extremely tough on his mom as well. So any amount of money will help, and we'll leave it at that. But as I said, we'll retweet it out from the Charm City account, but go to Jeremy's account if you can. We'll keep this positive, though. We'll try to keep it light on the podcast. But let's get into the Orioles. We got 6 new players, as I said, only 5 rounds of the draft this year, shortened by the whole pandemic. Most of the speculation leading up to this draft surrounded the Orioles, quite frankly, because it was another situation where the team picking first overall, with like the Orioles did last year, there was a consensus number 1 player. There wasn't much debate as to who would be taken first overall. So the Tigers ended up taking their guy that was the consensus number 1, like the Orioles did last year with Adley Rutschman. And then the debate starts at number 2, because the Orioles, a lot of people were, in their mock drafts. And again, not a lot of people actually make mock drafts for baseball, but the ones that do are usually prominent media outlet people, baseball insiders. But again, there really isn't much out there for you to, as a fan, I think, much out there for you to make a mock draft. But there are still crazy people out there that are so obsessed with mock drafts, they probably do. But I'm rambling here. The point I want to make is that a lot of people had Austin Martin going to the Orioles at number 2. He was considered by many to be the second best player coming out of this draft. There's still, maybe some people had the Orioles taking the best pitcher, Asa Lacy, but the next best position player was Austin Martin. So there was room for some debate. But what the Orioles ended up doing is taking a different player, a player that I don't think anyone had going to the Orioles, and that is Heston Kjerstad from Arkansas, who didn't, he is regarded as at least the top 10, top 15 by a lot of people. It's not like he was some crazy reach, I don't think. But again, I don't know the most here, but from what I've seen, most outlets had him ranked as a top 10, top 15 guy. The Orioles ended up taking him. He's a power hitter, again, from Arkansas. And this decision really, I'll list the names of the other draft picks here coming up, but this Kjerstad pick is the one that has captured the attention of everyone, particularly the Orioles fan base. And, you have some people that are vocally against it. Some people that really thought that the Orioles and Mike Elias and company should have taken Austin Martin as the clear-cut second-best player, so we think. There's no one out there right now that knows more about Heston Kjerstad than Heston Kjerstad himself and Mike Elias. There's no one out there telling you that they hate this pick that actually has watched just as much, or even come close to watching just as much film as Elias has, or anyone on the scouting team. Most of the people out there vocally against this pick have probably never seen Heston Kjerstad swing the bat once. Probably haven't seen Austin Martin swing the bat once. They are literally basing their opinion off of what they read from baseball insiders, from media outlets the day of the draft. They probably did no prior research. It was draft day. It was their lunch break at work. They know the draft's coming up, so they're going to look up a couple things to see who's projected to go where. And because the Orioles didn't take the guy that was projected to go to them, they're all up in arms, and they're turning on Elias, and they think that he's making some big mistake. Maybe so. Maybe he is. We don't know. We won't know for a couple years. Maybe Austin Martin is a better player than Heston Kjerstad is. Maybe Asa Lacy's a better player. We don't know. We won't know for a couple years. But even if they are, even if Kjerstad is the biggest bust in the world, you still don't have grounds to stand on right now to question Elias. You will technically be right in the long run to say that, I was right, they should have taken Austin Martin, but you weren't basing it off of anything. That's like me, if we flipped a coin right now. I don't have any research, data, any point of reference to tell you if it's going to be heads or tails. I'm making a guess. I'm going to guess that it's going to be heads. If it ends up being heads, I'm not going to walk around and gloat like God told me that it was going to land on heads and I knew all along and I did all the research. No, I didn't know. You took a guess, and that's what you would be doing to say that you think Austin Martin is going to be better than Heston Kjerstad or anybody. So I'm trusting Elias here. I'm going to let Ian go in a second because I've rambled long enough. But there's no reason for me not to trust Elias. It's only his second draft, and being honest, he hasn't done anything up until this point that says I shouldn't trust him.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's a controversial pick because it wasn't the guy that everybody said the Orioles were going to draft. I think, as you pointed out, I'm sure Mike Elias has spent a ton of time vetting this pick and working through who he wants in this spot and why he wants them in the spot that he took them. I think people need to give Elias a little more leadway. I just think it's interesting that people were so on board with Elias and walk with Elias and all that stuff that was going on when Elias and Maidal came in last year or 2 years ago, whenever it was. Now time flies. And now all of a sudden it's the same people that were all on board for this massive rebuild that are now saying, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. I don't know how you can take this guy and this, that, or the other. And he's not even a top 30 prospect. And, relax. Dylan Bundy was supposed to be a sure thing. There are other countless examples over the years. How about Ben McDonald? Nice guy, consensus number 1 overall pick. It never worked out for him in pro baseball. And unfortunately, that's the way the game works. I think baseball, more than any other game, is difficult to project at the next level. I think you see more massive swings and misses in the top 10 of the baseball draft than you would in some of the other drafts. Another thing to keep in mind is you're probably not going to see Heston Kjerstad for a few years anyways. Same would have been the case with Martin. So at this point, you simply don't have enough data to pan this decision. And many people were launching into these long rants about how I can't believe the Orioles missed this golden opportunity and, the rebuild's going to fail and this is why it's going to fail. And everybody needs to take a step back, take a deep breath, and relax. You're not going to rebuild the Orioles overnight. The 2020 first-round Orioles draft pick is not going to wreck the rebuild. It's not. There's plenty of other draft picks they could hit on. And who knows? I hope this kid Kjerstad turns out to be an absolute stud. And then everybody looks like an idiot 5 years from now. I hate to think about it in football terms, but it's a decent parallel. Look at Marlon Humphrey. People hated that pick. People didn't love the Ronnie Stanley pick. Those two are all pros now 3-4 years later. So you don't know what Heston Kjerstad's going to be. You don't know what Martin is going to be. So everybody needs to just take a chill pill, trust in Elias, and guess what? If Martin becomes a superstar and Kjerstad flunks out, that still doesn't mean that Elias is an idiot and doesn't know what he's doing. People get draft picks wrong all the time. In every sport, it happens regularly. And would it suck if it happened to the Orioles? Of course it would. They need Kjerstad to be a good player because he's going to help them hopefully rebuild and become a contender in the next 3 to 5 years. Now, if that doesn't happen, again, like I said, that doesn't mean Elias is an idiot and you're a genius. It just means that for one pick, Mike Elias happened to get it wrong. And until he does officially get it wrong, in air quotes, I think everybody needs to give him a little more credit. I think he, as you said, who's watched more tape on Heston Kjerstad? Joe Orioles fan 83 who's losing his mind, or Mike Elias?
Yep, and if you're still hung up on Martin being the consensus number 2 and he's sitting there, he's such an obvious pick. Well, if he was so obvious, why didn't the Marlins or the Royals take him either? He ended up falling all the way to number 5. So to me, if the Orioles really thought that Austin Martin was the second best player coming out of this draft, they would have taken him. The whole other part of this debate is the money and how the Orioles went under slot and they tried to save money and people think that they're being cheap or whatever. That I'm not ignoring that because it's a factor. I think it's a really goofy thing about the MLB draft that I don't like. One of many goofy things about the way money is handled in baseball that I don't like, but I'll move on. If the Orioles really thought that Martin was the guy, they would have taken him. He's right there. It's not like, they clearly weren't that high on him. And guess what? Maybe they weren't alone because the Marlins weren't that high on him and the Royals weren't either. The Royals ended up taking Asa Lacy, who's considered the best pitcher in the draft. So maybe they get a little more leeway than the Marlins and the Orioles. But he ends up falling all the way to number 5 and the Blue Jays take him. So we'll see. Now, if he ends up being great, then we're in trouble because he'll be added to an already really talented young core they've got there in Toronto in the division. But again, only time will tell. So we'll move on from there. The only other thing I wanted to bring up with the draft is the lack of pitching taken. And this is an actual debate we can have because I can't seriously listen to people when it comes to the picking for or against Kjerstad thing because, again, we just don't know. No one is really qualified to debate that. But as far as the amount of pitching taken, it's still an area where I'm going to trust Elias, but I think there's a reason to be concerned if you want. This is the second year in a row for Elias and company that they have not taken any pitchers early in the draft. They waited until their 5th round pick this year to take one, and they waited until the 8th round last year, I believe, to take a pitcher. Maybe that's just where the chips fall, probably a coincidence, but the way I feel is, this year is a little, the waters are a little more muddy this year because, again, it's only 5 rounds. You don't have as many picks. So if they didn't take a pitcher at all, I'm not going to sweat it. This year is different. There's a whole different context to this year. But last year, paired with this year, as I said, didn't take one until the 8th round last year. Again, still probably a coincidence, but if you're someone that really wants a lot of young pitching talent to come into the organization, I can understand why you're upset. For me, we know the MLB draft is a crapshoot. So whatever Elias and all the scouts in the Orioles system, whoever they think are the best players to come in and have the best shot of making the major league roster, whoever they think that is, I think they should take them. I don't care if they're all pitchers. I don't care if they're all first basemen. They're all catchers. Take them. There's no need to draft by position in the MLB draft. You can always change guys around. Most guys that are going to end up being infielders, third base, shortstop, second base in particular, they all come up as shortstops anyway. And then you can move them to second and third. First baseman will come up and maybe stay at first base, but maybe they get moved to corner outfield. You don't know. Some of the later round picks, Michael Givens was a shortstop? He gets converted to a pitcher, and now he's a pretty good reliever. I know we beat up on him a lot, but he's a major league reliever. He's able to hang around in the major leagues. Guys change positions all the time.
Zach Britton was drafted to be a ace starting pitcher and became one of the best relievers in baseball.
Yeah, and it's looking like Hunter Harvey might go that route too, where he's going to be a really good closer that throws absolute heat, almost triple digits. So we'll see. Guys change all the time. I don't have a problem with them not taking a pitcher. And if you look, at where Elias came from and his right hand man, tongue twister there for me, Sig Mejdal, they came from Houston, as we know. Look at their drafting model over the years during their rebuild. They put a huge emphasis on drafting their core position players that were going to lead them back to success. Correa, Altuve, Springer, Bregman. Those were all first-round picks, I think. And maybe one of them wasn't. But they drafted those guys to be the core of the team. And then they either developed their pitching from within with the analytics and retooling all of that, which the Orioles have now done, retooled their development system. And we've already seen more success out of some of their prominent young pitchers, DL Hall, Grayson Rodriguez, guys like that. So either they develop pitching within, or once it's time to be competitive again and your position players are winning you games, you go out and you either get someone at the trade deadline, or you buy someone in free agency. So that's the model. Once you're back to being competitive, you can always buy or acquire a stud starting pitcher or a lockdown reliever. There's always time to do that down the road. And the last thing I'll say here is the goal, yes, is to build a competitive major league team. But what has Elias been saying since he got here? It seems like every press conference he has, he brings up this phrase, elite talent pipeline. We've heard him say it so many times since he's been here, And that elite talent pipeline can be used, can be tapped into. Not all of those players are going to, whether they're all good or not all of them are going to come up and play for the Orioles. You can tap into that and take some of them and trade them and get a guy that's going to, trade them to another organization, and you'll get a guy that's going to come in and be a starting pitcher for you right now, someone you don't have to wait on. The elite talent pipeline just doesn't have to be for players coming from the minors all the way up to the majors. There's just too many guys in the system for that to be feasible. So what you hope is that you've got a rich farm system that's just bursting with talent, and you can actually get rid of some of it if you need to in a trade. Where are you on the whole pitching thing? Does it bother you at all that they haven't taken any pitching early, or are you just kind of indifferent on it?
I mean, it's always good to add arms. I guess it just matters. I guess it's hard to judge right now because you don't know how it's all going to play out, but you'd like to see them draft more arms. I'm just worried at some point this team's going to be good again, and are they going to be able to spend money to get the big name pitcher, to make the big trade for the big name pitcher, and then sign him and keep him? I think that's my biggest question with the Orioles organization right now in general is you draft players to turn into Manny Machado. I mean, and then you trade Manny Machado. So what's going to happen if Adley Rutschman's the real deal and he's just as at the top of the world as Machado was? Are we going to make that financial commitment to that kind of player? But back to your question at hand, they've got Grayson Rodriguez, who's a 36th overall rated prospect, according to MLB.com, right-handed pitcher, and DL Hall, as you mentioned, left-handed pitcher, the 69th overall prospect, according to MLB.com. So that's two pitchers in the top 70 of the MLB top 100 prospects list. These are two guys that should be here in a year in 2021. If we don't get a baseball season, that'll be this next year. That those two would be expected to arrive on the scene. Now, I don't know how that would impact their ability to be ready, but it seems like MLB.com seems to think that if we do have a season this year, those guys would be ready next season. So maybe he wants to see how they play out with another year of development before he starts sinking early draft picks into a pitching staff. And there wasn't, the one guy you mentioned, Asa Lacy, was the top pitching prospect, but who knows how long it's going to be before you see him. Like, the Orioles need to start putting a contingency plan in place to be good in 2 or 3 years. Like, they can't just keep losing 100 games every year and we're picking in the top 3 of the draft again. I hope we get a great pitcher that'll be here in 5 years. Like, at some point, push is going to come to shove. This team needs to start working towards that, and I think he wants to keep some space open for guys like Rodriguez and Hall. And obviously, again, as you said, the overall tone of this segment is trust your general manager, trust your player scouting. It's a lot different than when Dan Duquette was here and some of the folks that preceded him. So just keep an eye on that and hope that the Orioles prospects continue to progress well, and hopefully we see these guys in the near future.
Yeah, and if you look at the Orioles' first-round draft history, I just looked it up on Wikipedia. It's not great. You obviously have your guys that you were successful on, really successful. Manny Machado, Matt Wieters come to mind as guys that were all-stars, consistent starters, and Machado being a superstar for most of his time here. And, you got Dylan Bundy ended up being a starter. He wasn't a stud. He wasn't an ace, but he was a starter throughout his time here. Took him a little longer to get up here, but he's still, same thing with Kevin Gausman. They ended up being starters. So, I mean, that's hard enough just to make it to the majors. And then to hold down a spot in the rotation even harder. So to expect them to be, both of them to be an ace and to be your number 1 and your number 2 guy for years to come, that's the odds of that are actually really slim. So I won't call by no means are those picks busts. But for the most part,
I don't know, dude.
Well, I mean, it's hard. I mean, it
sucks to call them that, but isn't that kind of what they are?
Well, then I would just compare it to the rest of the league. Like, by those rules, if those guys were busts, then really nobody is good at drafting then. Would be my
I think that speaks to the difficulty of the baseball draft, right? Like, that to me is why I would trust Elias almost more than anything else. Is the MLB draft is all over the map. I mean, people miss every year. There's these elite pitching prospects or hitters that they're can't miss. They're slam dunks, and then they're not. Like, it's not an indictment of the Orioles organization for me to say that Dylan Bundy and Kevin Gausman were busts, but they were busts. And if you think it's unfair, that's fine. I don't think it's unfair. I don't think it's trashing the Orioles in any way. I just think that's the reality of the situation, is that guys are taken in the top 10 of the MLB draft, and 5 years they become Kevin Gausman, Dylan Bundy. There are players like that across the entire league. If you look at different teams and talk to fan bases, I'm sure they could say, "Oh, remember so-and-so? He was supposed to be a stud, and then he wasn't." Like, that's a fundamental, fact of professional baseball drafting, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would give baseball more leeway for the same reason you said, with how I throw out the term bust. Because, again, they did make the major league team. There's no guarantee of that. And then I did look up the Astros because I was trying to see who they picked in the first round, and
they had a bump come out one year,
right? But it was sandwiched between like 4 or 5 years around it where they took future All-Stars. Right. That is super rare. I don't know. I won't say you'd be hard pressed to find, because again, I haven't done the research myself. But I'm eager to look around at some other teams' history in the first round and see how often they took a player that they hit on. The Astros also took a lot of other players that they ended up trading that I saw that are now on other teams that aren't necessarily all-stars, but are consistent major league players. That I think what the Astros did is also we look at it as the model, and we look at it, the whole Astro Ball thing, and forget the cheating, because that's once you get to the games being played. But your model for building the team, the whole Astro Ball model, we're looking at that as Orioles fans because of Elias and Meidel and all these people. But maybe the Astros got lucky, because I'm not downplaying what they did there, because they seriously did a great job with their first-round picks for a long stretch of years. But, I mean, my God, that cannot be easy, and there has to be a little bit of luck involved to just land that many all-stars in like a 10-year span.
Yeah, and that's not normal at all. And as I said when everybody started talking about, I am a pessimist by nature, but I think it's a rational thought to say you can't just say, well, you just got to follow the Astros model. The Astros they got lucky, first of all. Most of their first-round picks absolutely exploded onto the scene. That's abnormal, and there's no guarantee that repeating that's going to work. Just for fun, I looked up the Texas Rangers first-round picks, because they've been a pretty decent team for the past, 10 years. They've been pretty solid. I've never heard of Dylan Tate. 2015 is the first guy I heard of. He was selected 4th overall. I think he's currently in the Orioles system. The other guys, Cole Reagans, Bubba Thompson, Chris Sicey, Cole Winn, Luis Ortiz. I think he actually had a stint with the Orioles too. 2014, 30th overall. So just picking a random team, it's hard to hit on your first-round draft picks in the MLB. And I don't know anything. Texas could be the worst drafting team ever. I just wanted to try to provide some sort of example back up to what you were talking about.
It's a crapshoot, and we just hope that the Orioles land on these. I will read. We've got Heston Kjerstad, but let me run through the other 5 picks. So the Orioles then took Jordan Westburg, shortstop out of Mississippi State. He was the 30th overall pick. There's like that weird short round between the first and the second round where teams from a smaller market get an extra pick. The Orioles took Westburg there. Second round, they took Hudson Haskin from Tulane. He's an outfielder. Third round, Anthony.
And a great name.
Hudson Haskin. A lot of good names here. But baseball names are the best. That's what I've come to know over the years, is that I think parents, when they name their kids, they know they're going to be a baseball player because they just have the most baseball name ever. So third round, Anthony Servideo, shortstop, Mississippi. Fourth round, Kobe Mayo, Kobe with a C, third baseman from Stoneman Douglas High School. And the last pick in the 5th round is a pitcher, Carter Baumler, Dowling Catholic High School. So there you go. There's your newest baby birds are on the scene, and we wish them the best. Again, it really sucks that there was only 5 rounds because go ahead and take a look through the Orioles' current roster or Orioles that, were on the team in recent years that we all loved. Go back and look up where they were drafted. I think you'd find that most of them were drafted in the later rounds. These guys that end up being great players, not just on the Orioles, but around the league, are taken well after the 5th round. So it's just a shame that, we won't be able to tap into that this year, but hopefully they'll have a chance next year. If they are, whether they're a high school player, they'll have a chance to go to college and then get drafted, or maybe they're not a graduating college player. They'll have a chance to go back for one more year at least in college and try again next year, but just unfortunate. So we'll move on from there. Let's talk a little football. John Harbaugh in particular made some headlines this week. I saw it was all over ESPN. A lot of media outlets were crediting 105.7, the home team. Good for the station to get some exposure out there. He was on Inside Access with Ken Weinman, Jason Lockenfora. They had him on the show earlier this week, and we're asking him about a whole bunch of stuff, generic off-season stuff, that's cleaning up some stuff from the draft. He had some interesting comments about that, by the way. They asked him why he was seen on the ESPN camera fist-pumping so hard after they drafted Devin Duvernay, and his answer was actually really interesting, and I'll go into this real quick, is that he said they had their plan laid out for all their third-round picks, and they were trying to decide what order they should take them in, what gave them the best chance to get all 3. They ended up getting all 3, but the reason he was so expressive after the Duvernay pick is that was I can't remember what pick overall it was, or even what number it was in the 3rd round, but it was the one where the Patriots traded up right in front of them. And Harbaugh says that he thought Belichick was moving up and he was going to take Devin Duvernay, and when they didn't, and the Ravens ended up taking him next, that's when you saw him so expressive on TV that he was so glad they got the receiver. I just thought that was a cool story. But the big quote that has everyone talking is Harbaugh being asked about the NFL's mandates as far as the coronavirus, what you can and can't do. As of now, we know that, some training facilities have been opened for coaches to come back. Harbaugh is back in the castle this week, we know that, but no players are back. Everyone's still working out on their own at home. And when asked about these mandates, and he said this.
I've seen all the memos on that, and to be quite honest with you, it's impossible what they're asking us to do. Humanly impossible. So, we're going to do everything we can do. We're going to space. We're going to have masks. But, this is a communication sport. So we want to get out there and actually have any idea about what we're doing on the field. We've got to be able to communicate with each other in person. We have to practice, and I'm pretty sure the huddle's not going to be 6 feet spaced. So I don't know. Our guy's going to shower one at a time all day. Our guy's going to lift weights one at a time all day. Right. These are things the league and the PA needs to get a handle on and needs to get agreed with some common sense.
I mean, that's the big takeaway, not just football, any sport. When you're going to get things rolling again, you're going to have to be in close proximity with one another. And you can do everything you can do, wear masks when you're not, actually practicing, avoid, direct contact, constantly hand sanitizing, doing everything you can do. But at the end of the day, you're going to be in pretty close proximity with other people. So if that's going to be an issue, then we need to address that now. And I think this is, Harbaugh's quote here is part of something larger. Everything we hear publicly about sports returning is from, whether it's GMs, fans wanting it back, commissioners. They all say, the league's going to come back. We're doing everything we can to have the league come back. Don't worry. You're not going to be without football. You're not going to be without baseball, hockey, basketball, whatever it is. We're coming back. Don't worry. We're going to change the format a little bit, but sports will be back. Don't worry. That's all we've heard. And then now we get sports back, the NBA in particular, and I don't want to sidetrack myself here from the greater issue, but I think it ties in here nicely. The NBA announces their plans to return last week, and now a week later, we've got a conference call with NBA players saying, well, hey, hold on a second. Who says I want to come back and put myself in that environment? We didn't hear that a week ago. We didn't hear that 2 weeks ago. It's not like these guys' opinions just changed. So my thing is that, the leagues aren't actually consulting the players in this. Baseball is a little different because there's actually negotiations going on. But in the case of the NBA, I don't think they asked the players, because if these reports are true about this conference call, there are a lot of players that are willing to sit out the remainder of the season and the postseason that are not going to go to Orlando to do this. So I'm going to connect these two because I think they tie in. I don't think the NFL is really thinking about this. They hold their draft, they go through, they release their schedule, they do all this stuff to get the fan base excited and to tell the fan base nothing but positive things and only indicate that, yes, a season is going to occur as normal. Maybe there's no fans in the stands, but the season will take place as normal. And then, who knows behind the scenes, well, okay, now we can't practice. We actually can't hold mini camps. We can't hold training camp as we normally would. It's just, if things truly aren't safe for players to return and all that, then what are we doing here? Why are we jumping through all these hoops to get sports back? If things aren't truly safe, why are you wasting our time? Just stop. Like, again, if it's not safe to return, then don't return until it's safe. Don't force it. And I'm just coming from the perspective of, I think whether you think it is safe to return or not, the fact is, like, why are we returning right now if you're still going to jump through all these hoops or handcuff, coaches and everything like you're doing here in the NFL? It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm not someone that's saying the coronavirus is BS or anything. It's obviously real. It's taken a toll. But where we go from here is a big deal. And as much as I want sports back, and I'm excited, as I was last week, that the NBA is returning, if it's not truly going to feasibly work out for these players, then it's not going to work out. Like, that's just the bottom line. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't lie to me and tell me that everything's all positive here and we're going to have the NBA back when behind the scenes, a majority of your player base doesn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know how many players were on the conference call, which players were the ones that had an issue with it. I would assume that the players had some input and insight into the plan, and all the teams had to sign off on it. I imagine that not just the owners signed off on it. So maybe these guys were out there all along and they didn't want to be dissenting voices, but having it come out after the fact is not a great look. And I agree with Harbaugh. I mean, if we're going to play, play. If we're not going to play, then don't play. Having these, what he's calling impossible restrictions upon, operating an NFL franchise, that doesn't sound like a ton of fun. It doesn't sound like it's going to be productive or like we're going to get high quality football if they do play. So I'm with you. I've kind of, all along I've approached this with guarded optimism, because until they get on the field, until they get on the ice, until they get on the hardwood, I'm assuming that nothing's going to happen until it starts to happen. You see the soccer leagues have gotten going around the world. The Premier League gets going again this Wednesday. But, those are outdoor games. I know NFL's outdoors, so maybe that's a little easier for them. But, everybody in the close quarters, at some point, they just need to decide whether they're going to play or not. Here's what bothered me the most about the basketball stuff. I'll bet you some of the players, and I think Adrian Wojnarowski actually confirmed this, some of the players that don't want to go are the ones that were saying, we don't think we have a chance to win a championship. You were also the same people bitching and moaning 2 weeks ago when you might not have gotten invited. So that's the part that I have a problem with is you pined, Damian Lillard, I think most famously was kind of like, hey, we should have a chance. I'm not coming back if I don't have a chance. Now, and I'm not saying he's one of the voices saying he's not coming back, but if that's the opinion of the player, if they don't think they can win a championship, they don't want to come back. I mean, then don't come back. Don't pine for your teams to be given the invite to the tournament if you don't want to go anyways because, we might not win the championship. Like, so what's the point of playing any season? I mean, if you know you're going to be a bottom feeding team, I don't think we're going to win the championship. To me, that's a cop-out excuse.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that, and it would be more. I know the only name we have as far as NBA players is Kyrie Irving, but he's not playing because he's coming back from an injury.
He also thinks the Earth is flat.
Oh well, yeah, Kyrie has been very vocal about a lot of things, but he's not eligible to play right now. I mean, he's still returning from injury, and his whole thing, from what I saw, is that he's wondering, well, am I going to be there? Am I taking up a space because I'm not playing? Like, do they want me there to sit on the bench and be there for my team? That sounds like a good idea, but again, he's taking up another space. He's another body in this quarantined area, so to speak, in this bubble. Is that really valuable then for him to be there? I think that's a fair question. And that, again, that extends to all other players that are, whether they're injured or what have you, that really aren't going to play, or all the other people. I mean, how many people from your coaching staff are going to be there? All of that. I mean, how many? You have to, at a certain point, you have to think about how you're going to limit the amount of people you actually have here, just because, again, it's less people around each other, but it's also less people that you have to pay for tests every day. That's another big factor. If you are going to test people every day or every series, every week, whatever the time period is, that's a lot. That's extra tests you have to give out. So, I mean, if a player like Kyrie,
I think those are fair points.
Yeah.
I think those are fair points.
Yeah. If Kyrie doesn't want to be there because he's not going to play anyway, then yeah, I think that's a fair question.
Yeah, I've got no problem with that. I don't think the NBA would have a problem with that either.
But he's also, in turn, he's seemingly leading the charge here for the other players that we don't know the names of right now, or who have not come out and given their name or stood behind this on social media, what have you. He's kind of leading the charge for them and saying, if you feel like you want to sit out, let's band together and let's make this a group effort because we'll be stronger in numbers. And that's where you have this whole conflict, I guess. But, until... And
at the end of the day, I think if players don't want to come back and they don't feel safe, then they shouldn't have to. I don't see why we can't make this like let's just be transparent here. Like, if I don't know, if Chris Paul doesn't want to come back, he shouldn't have to come back. I don't think the Thunder should be able to make him come back. But if the rest of the Thunder want to play and Chris Paul doesn't feel comfortable playing, then he shouldn't have to play. And I don't think that the players would dog him for that. I think they would say, oh, Chris is probably thinking of his family. I mean, I think it's simpler than we're making it in a lot of these cases. And listen, do I think people would be disappointed, like Thunder fans would be disappointed that Chris Paul wouldn't come back and their players might be disappointed? Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, people would get over it. And I'm just using Chris Paul as an example here. Right. Like, I don't expect... I'm thinking like second-tier superstar kind of guy. Like LeBron, if they come back, LeBron James is going to play. I don't think that there's any question about that. That would be a title-altering decision for him to sit out. I would think the league would be smarter than to go on with the season without the buy-in of the Giannis's, the LeBrons, the Kawhi Leonards of the world. That would be really stupid to me if those guys are threatening not playing and the NBA goes, we're going to play anyways. The asterisk will be put on this championship more than likely, depending upon who wins it. And if people start sitting out and a lot of the superstars aren't playing, it's definitely going to get an asterisk in the social media age that we live in.
Yeah, so I guess where I stand on it is until we get a player like that that's actually playing, is not injured or whatever, that says that, hey, I'm sitting out and they're a bigger name player, then you're going to have the debate. And I would hope that people would understand that and respect that decision, but obviously that it's not going to be the case across the board, and I don't know if it would be the case across the board for everyone involved with that person's team. I mean, depending on how big of a player they are, the starter or whatever, I mean, some teammates might look at them a little different and say, hey, you're walking out on the team.
Yeah, and I think that's a situation they should try to avoid, the NBA.
Right. So
I mean, that would be an ugly look.
Yeah, and it's something that I hope we aren't moving towards, but based on just what I've heard now with this whole conference call thing, we'll just keep an eye on it. And again, we have the target date, we're working towards it, and we'll just hopefully basketball does return and everything goes according to plan. But what I wanted to close on was baseball, and I don't mean to close on a down note, but I quite frankly have lost hope here with baseball. I think that, to tie this into what we were talking about just a second ago with owners and commissioners telling us everything's all right and then not having everything all right going on behind the scenes, look at Rob Manfred, the day of the draft, comes out, says we're definitely going to have baseball. Don't worry, guys. And that announcement there, that statement is sandwiched between two negotiation offers from the owners and players union that are immediately shot down, immediately laughed at, no progress being made. And to me, we're just running out of time here. It was 2 weeks ago, I think, where we had the Jeff Passons of the world telling us this is the most important week in baseball history. It's 2 weeks later, and we're still no closer than we were then. At what point are you going to run out of time for negotiations? Because, again, I side more with the players union. I still stand by that, but there is a time restriction here. We don't have all the time in the world to negotiate. So if we're not going to have a season, then we're not going to have a season. I've already said that I'm not up in arms about that. I will be here watching in 2021. I'm going to be disappointed that I'm not going to be able to see baseball until then, even though I'm an Orioles fan and they aren't going to be that good. I still would like to see baseball played at Camden Yards this year. So I will be disappointed in some regard. But I'll be back next year, and I'll be more excited than ever. So that's where I stand. But to be honest, in 2020, I've lost hope. To anyone saying that, baseball's definitely going to happen, don't worry. Whether it's Manfred, owners, media people, whoever, I'm not listening to you, because we've been saying that for a month now. We've been saying that baseball is coming back. It has to come back. There's no way we don't have a season in some capacity. Who says? What are you basing this off of? I mean, time just we're almost in mid-June. In a couple days, it's going to be the 15th. We're going to be halfway through this month.
It's almost time for the All-Star break.
Yeah.
Because, early July is the All-Star break.
Exactly. And that's when they were planning on actually getting going. But the more we push back, the season's going to get pushed back into mid-July and then late July. And then, how many games are we actually playing? You scoffed at 50 games like it was a joke. Well, if we keep going on longer here, that's going to be your only choice left is 50 games. To me, the owners keep coming back with what appear to be different and new proposals in the public eye. But when you look at the core money and how it's divided up, the length of the season is different. One proposal has 80-some games, then one proposal has 70, the next proposal has 50. There's a proposal for whatever game amount it is, but they divide the money up proportionally every time, so the money's not moving, just the amount of games is. And what you have here is negotiation fatigue, not just for the people actually negotiating, but for the fans. And that's why through this whole process, more and more people are getting fed up. Honestly, it's all part of the owner's plan. Goes back to what we said from the beginning. They want to turn the fans against the players. That's part of their negotiation tactic. That's part of their game plan. You're creating this illusion amongst the common fan that the players have been turning down, 5-6 different offers. And now the average fan is sitting here saying, well, come on, guys, what's it going to take? You fielded 5 or 6 offers here. Is nothing good enough for you? Well, in reality, those 5-6 offers weren't that different. So, yeah, I mean, it's just an unfortunate situation we're in, and I'm going to the big thing I come back to is the time aspect, and that's really what it comes down to for me, is that you don't have all the time in the world here. It's running out, and that's why I don't think baseball is going to come back this year.
Yeah, I'm just over talking about it with all the sports. I think I want it back pretty damn badly. Like, I'm tired of watching TV. I'm tired of watching movies. The dreaded question comes from my wife every night. What do you want to watch tonight? Like, I don't have an answer anymore. Like, I don't want to watch TV. I don't want to watch movies. I want to watch sports. I want to be able to say, hey, the Caps play tonight, so I'm watching that. We can catch up on our trash TV another night. Like, I want it back more than anybody does. But until they're back, they're not. And there can be all these great plans and all these great ideas and, this target start date of this, that, or the other. The only sports that have been able to deliver on that so far are NASCAR, golf, and international soccer. So until one of the major U.S. sports is able to deliver a plan that gets their athletes back onto the playing surface, whatever that might be, I'm going to sit here and believe that it's not going to happen. And that sucks, and that's disappointing. And, listen, baseball is not my top sport, but I'd like there to be baseball on. It'd be something to watch, something to get into for a little bit. I wouldn't mind a shortened season, but you're right. As I pointed out, the home run derby at the All-Star game would be occurring in a few weeks. Like, at what point are we just going to have to bag this thing? It's getting there. I think that's obvious. We're already starting to talk about NFL training camps, which is typically the Orioles are out of it by then, and we've zoned out on baseball. So I think it's something to monitor. I'm not sure it gets better anytime soon, but I'm hopeful they play. If they don't play, like you said, we talked about last week, it won't change anything about my intentions to watch baseball moving forward. So I just, like you said last week, show me. There was a goalie at Loyola High School when I was growing up, and Curly and Loyola both had good soccer teams. And people would always tell this kid at Loyola, I'll score on you, I'll make you look bad. And he would always respond the same way and say, show me. And every time he'd shut him down. So until you're able to get on the field or the ice or the hardwood, I'm going to believe that it's not going to happen. And that sucks. But I think that's really the best way to go about it, so you're not disappointed.
That's where we're at. That's just the reality. So again, I hope I'm wrong, sure, but I don't think I'm going to be wrong. And again, I'm not basing my opinion off of any inside information. I don't have a source or anything, by no means. I'm just a fan. I'm just telling you how I feel watching these negotiations go down, and there isn't any give and take here by either side. So these aren't negotiations, because we're not any closer than we were 2-3 weeks ago. There isn't any giving and taking. Both sides have their feet dug in, and that's why I think there's no way we get this in. And I turn my attention to the NBA, hoping that their plans actually work out, and the NHL can follow suit, and then obviously the NFL, which is all of our favorite sport. It's everything. It runs our calendar year, the NFL. I turn my attention to that and just hope that can take place as normal. I'll sacrifice everything else if it means we have football. That's going to do it for episode 106. We appreciate you listening. Again, I'll circle back to the top of the show. Our friend Mo Gabba, best Baltimore sports fan out there, best caller in 105.7 The Fan history, without a doubt. His fight is still going on. The fight has never stopped for him and his mother. And if you can find it, if you can find a couple extra bucks here or there, again, don't feel like you have to give the most money here. But if you can give a couple bucks, I know Jeremy Kahn from The Fan, someone that I trust deeply. So again, if you're worried about trusting someone with money, you can trust Jeremy. Go to his Twitter page. You can go to our Twitter page. We'll retweet it, the information out there. He's collecting funds that's going to go to Mo Gabba's mom on Tuesday. He's going to see them. So I'll close on this because it's great. This was as of an hour ago, about right before we started recording. Jeremy tweeted out, said, just hit $10,000 in donations, and this is from literally, I think, the last 24 to 48 hours. We're talking 10,000 in donations. That's insane for just off of social media. Let's keep this going, guys, and that'll do it for 106. Reminder, the podcast is on YouTube. It's on Spotify now. Subscribe on those outlets if you prefer to listen on there. Wherever you listen, we appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next week.